Dear learners, I hope in the first lesson on Introduction to Social Work, you must have developed some basic understanding of what social work is, how social work as a profession is different from the commonly used term social work. Now in this second lesson, we will talk about historical development of social work in United Kingdom, United States of America and India. Now before going into details of this particular lesson, I must begin with the basic note that in order to understand the historical development of social work, that the beginning and gradual development of social work profession is a product of events, efforts and initiatives of a number of individuals and organizations. And it was these initiatives in various forms and at different levels that contributed in the development of social work profession. Each country has its own unique history. Each country has its own unique societal context, and it is in that particular context we need to understand and we need to locate the origin of social work. And that's why when we will be talking about the history of social work, we will be looking into what are those unique things that paved the way for the emergence of professional social work that today we call as social work profession. And that's why in this particular lesson you would be able to understand the worldwide beginning of social work, to comprehend the gradual development of social work in United Kingdom, United States of America and India. You would also be able to appreciate the role of key contributors in the professional growth of social work in UK, US and India. Beginning of social work education. I am starting with social work education simply to acquaint you with the fact that how social work education or what were the pioneering institutions from where social work has started its journey. Before going into the details of history of social work in Europe, America and India, let's briefly have a look at major landmarks in social work education, so that before understanding the history, you will be in a position to focus yourself on how social work education is started. This will keep you remain focused on understanding the history of social work. The beginning of professional education of social work, an honor of recognition as the very first school of social work worldwide, belongs to Institute of Social Work Training, founded in 1899 in Amsterdam in Europe. In the United States of America, the Summer School of Philanthropic Work that was started in 1898 in New York heralded the beginning of professional education of social work. And in 1904, it evolved as New York School of Philanthropy. And it was one of the pioneering school of social work education in America. In the Indian context, social work education began with the start of Sir Dorabji Tata Graduate School of Social Work in the year 1936. So these three landmarks, social work education in Europe, social work and education in America and social work education in India, these are the three landmarks just to give an idea about the history when social work education started in these countries. But the start was not sudden. The start was product of continuous efforts in this particular direction of developing the trained manpower or developing the trained people to provide services to the society. And it is in that context that the social work as a profession emerged. So now let's move on. Brief history of social work in UK, US and India. In this section, first I will like to talk about how we need to understand, how we need to see the history of social work. And then we will be trying to understand a specific history of social work in UK, USA and India. It is difficult to affix a date to the beginning of social work profession. In the countries where social work was first developed, helping activities began under a variety of auspices. It was this variety of activities that paved the way for the gradual development of social work profession. For example, the early efforts in organizing and regulating charities resulted in the need of trained volunteers, an organized system of working and skilled workers. These together resulted in the efforts to develop trainings and courses, which slowly and gradually resulted in the beginning of social work education. The figure here provides you an idea about how the social work originated or what are the roots of social work origin. As I said, there is no fixed date for the beginning. We cannot fix a date for the beginning of social work profession. Let's move on to social work in UK, United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is much credited to what we have today as social work. It is much acknowledged as the land for the origin and development of social work in 19th century. As a basic question, whenever it is asked where social work originated, then the answer is social work originated in United Kingdom. Now there is a history to this. Much of social work initiatives in other countries, especially America, trace their legacy to the initiatives and activities in United Kingdom. And we also know this was also the land for the beginning of industrialization. So in United Kingdom, it was the initiatives by the individuals like Octavia Hill and organizations like Charity Organization Society that paved the way for the gradual development of social work profession. It is said that social work has number of ideological origins. Now there is a debate on this, but at least 2 points we would like to refer here. One, social work is the continuation of philanthropic and charitable traditions connected to the activities of various churches, laws to regulate these charities to poor, and response to inhuman poor laws. Secondly, social work also seeks its roots in social movements, particularly in the labor movement and women's movement in the United Kingdom. Basically, what we are trying to elaborate in this lesson or by these 2 points is that the social work has its contextual roots to the initiatives with regard to the conditions in the society, state's response to those conditions in the society, and also response of social movements to those conditions. So state in continuation to its response to poverty and pauperism was making poor laws more stringent. The poor laws heavily regulated the unorganized charities to the extent that voices were also raised against inhuman poor laws. That is, the poor laws that were framed to regulate charities were becoming too inhuman. The Charity Organization Society was one such response. These voices for the poor also coincided and came from parallel social movements like the labor movement. Therefore, a brief discussion of poor laws, Charity Organization Society, and Octavia Hill will be made here. A brief discussion on these three will help you understand the brief history of social work in the United Kingdom. Now let's first talk about poor laws and Charity Organization Society. The poor laws have a long history in the United Kingdom. The first poor law in England was passed 1598 in 6th century during the reign of Queen Elizabeth and revised in 1601, and thereafter many amendments were made resulting in what was called Elizabethan poor laws. So there is no one poor law, but rather there are series of laws that are called as Elizabethan poor laws. The state responded by dividing poor into those who deserve help and those who did not. Poor law differentiated three classes of poor: the able-bodied poor, the impotent poor, and the dependent children. Now let's talk about these three categories of poor. Able-bodied poor were to be provided with work or with punishment in jail or the stocks if they refused to work. They were also called sturdy beggars, and that's why the focus was that the able-bodied poor are made to work, and if they are not ready to work, then they must be put to jail where they are trained to work. Next category is impotent poor, who were to be kept in almshouses. They were people unable to work, the sick, the old, blind, deaf, mute, lame, and the mothers with young children. So impotent poor, the poor who were not in a position to work, they were kept in the almshouses. Third category was of dependent children, who were to be apprenticed unless parents or grandparents could support them. They were orphans and children who had been deserted by their parents or whose parents were so poor that they could not support them. The boys were to be apprenticed until they were 24 years old, and the girls until they were either 21 years or married. So poor laws particularly divided the poor into these three different categories, and as per these categories there was response to these category of poor by the state. In England in 1860s, there was a considerable increase in number of applicants for the aid that focused attention on welfare and helping the poor. As a result, there was revived concern in social reform, and some individuals like Octavia Hill became interested in bringing about innovation and change. Innovation to work with people, innovation to work with poor. As a result of their efforts and those of others, a new type of organization emerged in 1869 called the London Society for Organizing Charitable Relief and Repressing Mendicancy, which was popularly called London Charity Organization Society, COS, Charity Organization Society. And in much of social work discussion, COS, Charity Organization Society, became an agency as precursor to social work profession. COS marked its presence with the friendly visiting of poor localities. So COS, Charity Organization Society, came up with the concept of friendly visiting to the poor localities, and accordingly the members of the charity organization society, their volunteers, were called friendly visitors. These friendly visitors were mainly represented by elite white women who helped the poor overcome poverty and pauperism. It focused its work on the coordination of work of various charitable societies in London so as to prevent duplication. As I said earlier, there were unorganized charities. So one of the important focus of charity organization society was to organize charities and to avoid duplication of work. Second, an acquaintance by each work of other agencies. Thirdly, a bureau of registry for all cases. Fourth, personal service to promote independence of spirit rather than giving of material aid. And the last point that focused was a devotion to the measures for prevention of pauperism. Earlier, the much focus was that the poor are poor not because they lack material support, but they are poor because poverty lies in the mind. So focus was on the fact that it is not the poverty, rather it is the pauperism that is the problem. So focus was on changing the character of people. Now this is an important point, and this is also a debatable point that we will discuss later on. Now let's talk about the efforts of Octavia Hill. Octavia Hill is widely acclaimed as the founding mother of social work. Octavia Hill was one of the founding members of the Charity Organization Society set up in 1869 in London. It was basically in 1864 that as a teacher and artist, she first started to work in the poorer neighborhoods of London. Her major focus was on working with people at the lowermost in the social hierarchy, unemployed poor, and living in cold and damp dwellings. Housing was her main concern. So she started her work in the slums of London by initiating her housing activities. But it was the way she worked with the people that made her relevant to the professional practice of social work. Work with the people, she developed her volunteers, and she was communicating with her volunteers through letters, and those letters have come up as letters to fellow workers. And in these letters there are much things that the social workers today can learn about. For example, in her letters to fellow workers, she declared at the outset that her major goal was to help the people help themselves and to render them independent of her help. It is enough to say that we see the beginning of new kind of helping relationship based on certain principles, many of which today be regarded as good social work. So this very notion of making the volunteers understand that our goal is to help the people help themselves is reflective of the fact that Octavia Hill's concern was not simply to help the poor, rather to make them self-reliant. And today it is one of the basic objectives of social work is to help the people help themselves. So social work was evolving. This is the point that we need to understand when we are trying to understand the history of social work. Through a series of letters to fellow workers, she enunciated the principles governing their activities. Here is some what she communicated. Each case and each situation must be individualized. Every person must be treated with respect for their privacy and independence, unquote. She advised her workers not to judge the tenants by their personal standards. It is essential to remember that each man has his own view of life and must be free to fulfill it, that in many ways he better judge than we, as he has lived through and felt what we have only seen. They were not to judge, but were expected to help each person judge rightly what needed to be done. This marked the beginning of what today constitute basic values and principles governing the practice of social work. Now, if you look over these two sentences or these two basic guidelines that she was giving to the fellow workers, then it seems that she is emphasizing on the self-determination of the client. She is emphasizing on what today we call as non-judgmental attitude, and therefore here we could feel that the value of worth and dignity, individualization, non-judgmental attitude, confidentiality and self-determination, these values and principles were evolving through the writings of Octavia Hill, and that's why she is rightly recognized as founding mother of social work. Octavia Hill is significant in the history of social work because she rejected charitable alms. She was deeply religious but strongly objected to mixing religion with the form of help. This is also equally important fact that social work as a professional activity is a secular activity. Her intention was to provide help without alms, arguing that charity tended to be resented and served to keep people on the margins of poverty. Almost all Victorian charity reformers were influenced in one way or other by Octavia Hill. Many ways than one, Hill's approach created the profession of social work. Her publication of 1883, and the title of the publication was The Homes of the London Poor, has helped spread her message across the world. Also gave impetus to the initiatives of individuals like Octavia Hill, and it is the cumulative effect of these that resulted into the emergence of social work profession. Now, with this discussion, we will move on to social work in United States of America. The roots of social work in United States of America may be founded in extensive volunteer movement during the formative years of United States. In the colonial period, for example, it was assumed that the individuals or families would care for themselves. But if further difficulties existed, friends, neighbors, or the representative of the community would volunteer to meet their needs. The significant development leading to emergence of social work in United States of America was the establishment of Charity Organization Society of Buffalo, New York in 1877. So the Charity Organization Society that was established in London in 1869 became a precursor to many of the charity organization societies that started in other countries, including USA. One, finding the means to help the poor. Second, preventing the poor from taking advantage of numerous uncoordinated social agencies that provide financial assistance. As I said in the beginning, that there were unorganized charities, and that's why, because of unorganized charities, state came up with oppressive, inhuman poor laws. But there was a need to give human touch. So these charity organization societies were a response to provide human touch to the poor, to provide human touch to the people. So whether it is London Charity Organization Society or the charity organization societies in United States of America, their purpose was very focused. One, to help the poor, and secondly, to help them overcome from their own situation. Leaders in social work from charity organization movement included Mary Richmond, who helped identify a theory of practice. Her books, The Friendly Visiting Among the Poor, that was published in 1899. Social Diagnosis, that was published in 1917, first basic textbook of social work. So social diagnosis marked the very methodological practice of social work. There is another book that the Richmond wrote, and it is titled as What is Social Casework, and published in 1922. There were others in America. Edward T. Devine, a founder of the New York School of Philanthropy in 1898, and Potter Lee, who was instrumental in founding the American Association of Schools of Social Work in 1919. The settlement house movement that was initiated in 1886 was another important development. It was inspired from the Toynbee House of London, and people like Jane Addams established settlement houses in New York and Chicago. So many of the people contributed in the development of social work in United States of America. Now we will move on history of social work in India. That India has a rich history of varied forms of charity, and also a wider legacy of social reform movements. However, it was in 20th century that some of the leaders of Indian national movements also thought of need to train people for social service and welfare of people. The legends like Gopal Krishna Gokhale and his Servants of India Society emphasize on formal training of volunteers. Mahatma Gandhi's village reconstruction programs also marked the beginning of volunteers for community service. But the real beginning of social work education was started in the year 1936. Clifford Manshard, an American missionary, was the founder of the undergraduate school of social work that today developed into a university as Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Under the auspices of American Board of Mission in Western India, popularly called as Marathi Mission, Clifford started a settlement house called the Nagpada Neighborhood House, and later on, in association with Tata family, he moved on to start the first school of social work that was at the time called as Sardorabji Tata Graduate School of Social Work, started in the year 1936. Thereafter, many of the social work schools started. So friends, this is brief about history of social work in UK, USA and India. And finally, to sum up, that social work has its root in the tradition of charity, social service and social movements of the nation. However, these traditions and the movements by themselves are not professional social work, but they have contributed in the growth and development of social work. Historical conditions, especially those created due to industrialization and colonization, mark the churning in the society. This churning resulted in individuals and organizations experimenting with the systems of helping the poor and needy, and also developing trained volunteers and workers. This is the context in which charity organization society started in many parts of the world, as also the social work pioneers like Octavia Hill, Jane Addams, Mary Richmond, Clifford Manshard, to name few from UK, US and India. So this is brief about the history of social work in UK, USA and India. Now there are few questions. First, enlist the contribution of Octavia Hill in the growth of social work. Second, comment on the beginning of social work in India. Now let's move on to references.